So I just wanted to remind you that a final exam has been scheduled for the forenoon of 22nd. Forenoon of 22nd. So that is highlighted here. And you would have to book a time slot. You would have to book a time slot on 18th or 20th, or you could do it on 19th also, between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. For a short Viva OC for all the candidates, all the students, sorry. Yeah. So today we will be talking about reactions with carbon monoxide. We have already discussed carbon monoxide in other contexts, but this time we are going to talk about some catalytic processes. And this, as I told you, is reasonably important. It belongs to a class of reactions which are called C1 chemistry. The C1 chemistry is important because one of the chief sources of carbon is coal, and coal is converted into a useful form in carbon monoxide. Through controlled oxidation of coal, you would get carbon monoxide. In the water gas shift reaction, you can have this carbon monoxide. So the next most important product is acetic acid. And acetic acid is something which is used in tonnage quantities. And you might be wondering why acetic acid is needed in tonnage quantities. It's used in tomato ketchup, but it's not because of the increase in the amount of pizzas that are consumed. Vinyl acetate is one of the major products that are generated from acetic acid. So vinyl acetate is one. So acetic acid is required for that. There are other compounds which are generated from acetic acid, apart from the fact that vinegar itself is just acetic acid. So carbon monoxide chemistry is extremely important. In all these processes, there is an insertion reaction where carbon monoxide has inserted into the MCO bond. Carbon monoxide is inserted into the MCO bond, either an alkyl or an aryl species. That's a one electron ligand. One electron ligand migrates to carbon monoxide to generate a new species, or we can also have a situation where a two electron ligand, like an alkene or an alkyne, do oxidative coupling. So this is a migration reaction, and this is an oxidative coupling reaction. So these are two major pathways by which either two electron ligands or one electron ligand can couple with carbon monoxide to generate new products. I will start with the Monsanto's process. The Monsanto's process, like I said in the very first class, generates acetic acid by a simple insertion of carbon monoxide into methanol. Monsanto's process, I think, started somewhere around 1968. Around 1968. And before that, in 1950, cobalt was used as a catalyst for the same process, but it was only 70% efficient. Monsanto's process was close to 90% efficient. And so that becomes a very, that was a big step, but Monsanto's process used rhodium. In spite of that, it used rhodium. It used it at a high temperature, high pressure, 30 atmospheres of carbon monoxide. This itself is very difficult because carbon monoxide is very corrosive. Most steels have nickel in them. So you need a special alloy of iron in order to construct a vessel which will hold carbon monoxide under high pressure, which will not have nickel, because nickel will form NiCO4 and it will weaken the cylinder, and essentially you will have accident. So carbon monoxide handling at high pressures is a major challenge, and Monsanto's process had to overcome that, and so did the cobalt catalyst. And more than that, in this process, there was the generation of HI. And HI is essential for driving the reaction. It is essential for driving the reaction. I will come to that in a moment. But the key resting state of the catalyst is this rhodium iodide species, which I have indicated here. So this process was an extremely challenging process. First of all, it used rhodium, which was very expensive. It used carbon monoxide under high pressure, and that was a major challenge. And it used HI, which was corrosive. In fact, it is mentioned that HI is so corrosive that even with the best materials that you use, HI can corrode high pressure pumps. These require high pressure pumps, and these pumps had to be replaced every 3 months. And these are not small pumps that you might use in your households. These are huge industrial pumps. And so in spite of all this expense, generation of acetic acid through this route was extremely efficient, and so it turned out to be a valuable addition to the industry. I had mentioned that HI is essential for driving the reaction, and this is because HI converts methanol into methyl iodide. And if you look at the first step in the reaction, the first step in the reaction is the reaction between methyl iodide and the rhodium species that we have written. We'll write the catalytic cycle in a minute, but this is not possible with only methanol. It is because of the presence of methyl iodide that the reaction goes at such a facile process. So it's important that you have HI in the reaction medium, and HI converts CH3OH into CH3I, and CH3I reacts with the catalytically active species, which is written here. So let's look at the full cycle. The full cycle is, in fact, I have reproduced what is given in Elschenbroich's book. Okay, and I have obviously done that for a particular purpose. So methanol is converted in the first step into methyl iodide. That's a fairly straightforward reaction which takes place in the absence of the catalyst also. The methyl iodide, however, is essential for doing an oxidative addition. So the first step is an oxidative addition. And with methanol, that oxidative addition is not going to be easy. So oxidative addition of methyl iodide will, of course, just like the Vasquez complex, this is like the Vasquez complex. This is rhodium 1. And if you do an oxidative addition, you will get a rhodium 3 species, and you will get it as a trans complex to in this case. And now I have negatively charged species because I oxidatively added a neutral molecule, methyl iodide. So I have a negatively charged species, which is rhodium 3. Surprisingly, you will notice that there are 3 iodides on this molecule, 3 iodides on the rhodium, and that would significantly reduce the 3 iodides and a methyl group, and so the net charge is in fact minus. And so, although we are calling it a rhodium 3 species, the charge on the rhodium is not going to be plus 3. And this has important consequences because you have 2 carbon monoxides on the rhodium, and they will not be stable if you have a positively charged species that is coordinating to it. So the second step is, of course, a migration to a cis group. So the methyl is now going to migrate. The methyl is now going to migrate to a carbon monoxide, and you end up with an rhodium acetyl bond. The rhodium acetyl bond is formed. So one electron, remember what we told you in the class about migratory insertion, the one electron ligand, which is the methyl group, migrates to carbon monoxide. So this is a classic migratory insertion step. Okay, so this is a migratory insertion step. First we had an oxidative addition step. Now, of course, the book writes addition of carbon monoxide to form an 18 electron complex. Okay, now this will be a 16 electron species. Remember, in the migratory insertion, there is no change in the oxidation state. There is only a vacant coordination site which is generated. Now, the formation of 18 electron species is followed by a reductive elimination. Okay, reductive elimination, and that reductive elimination can happen with these 2 species, which will give you CH3COI, and in a, like you might call it like an offline process, water converts CH3COI to CH3COH, and HI is generated. This regenerates the methyl iodide. This regenerates the methyl iodide from methanol, and you end up with the catalytic cycle. So, based on what you have studied so far, can you recognize some problems with this catalytic cycle? So,
the reductive elimination step.
Yeah, what about it?
We need a vacant site, a ligand dissociation, then reductive elimination.
Yeah. So what we have repeatedly encountered is that, in contrast to simple, what shall I say, intuition, that you should have a crowded complex from which you can release 2 ligands, you in fact need a vacant coordination site. So it's not necessary that we go through this step where you coordinate carbon monoxide. So this step is redundant. It might be happening separately. In fact, I can write a step which is kind of a distraction for the rhodium complex. I can write a step where I would have this happening along with iodine, 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 carbon monoxide. Okay, so this could be happening, but then the reductive elimination itself must be happening from a coordinatively unsaturated 16 electron species. That's probably what is happening, and the remaining things are exactly the same. So the carbonylation of methanol through the Monsanto's acetic acid process was in fact deduced primarily from high pressure IR studies, high pressure IR studies, and these studies provided sufficient proof for the intermediacy of species like this, and so they proposed, or like this I should say. So it's a process which is very well accepted as the possible catalytic cycle. Turns out that, like I told you, the cobalt process also requires iodine. Cobalt iodide was used to generate the dicobalt octocarbonyl. That is the previous process. That was a German process. I forget the name of the company. I think, yes, it was BASF. So BASF used cobalt. Monsanto used rhodium, and right after the discovery of Monsanto's process, maybe about 10 years down the line, there was another process called Cativa. It's another company which used iridium. So they just went down the periodic table. And the Cativa process is in fact even more efficient than the rhodium process. But I think the mechanism of methanol being converted to acetic acid is fairly well established, and this is the accepted mechanism and probably the best that you can think of. Now let me move on to olefin hydroformylation. Now, many of these reactions are going to involve similar steps, so we will go through it fairly rapidly. We won't spend so much time on these reactions, but the interesting point is in these cases, many times you have a small change in the catalyst or in the ligand system that they are using, and that change the efficiency of the process, because you will realize that multiple products can be generated using the same reactants. The same reactants can give you multiple products. And so selectivity turns out to be a key factor in selecting, in choosing the right catalyst. So here I have for you on the slide, I have ethylene, not ethylene, an alkene plus hydrogen plus carbon monoxide. And notice that we could have multiple types of reactions from this, but what we want to accomplish is the addition of hydrogen and carbon monoxide in order to generate linear aldehyde. That is a target molecule. And the side product is in fact this branched aldehyde. So people worked on these reactions. I will tell you why you need this process, but basically this is something that is used in the detergent industry, I think, but all these chemical companies, Ruhr Chemie is again a German company which was present on the banks of the river Ruhr, and they used cobalt and generated the aldehyde. Let's take a look at the catalytically active catalytic cycle. Cobalt one of the things that happens when you mix cobalt and carbon monoxide under high pressure with hydrogen is that it gets reduced to cobalt 0, and cobalt 0 is of course CO2 CO8, and that readily reacts with hydrogen to generate HCO CO4. So HCO CO4 is in fact the starting point for this process. They can start off the reaction with any species of cobalt with a high pressure of carbon monoxide and hydrogen and generate HCO CO4. Now, the first step would be, of course, ligand dissociation. Ligand dissociation is probably common to almost every catalytic process because the resting state of the catalyst is a species which would be most probably an 18 electron species, if not a 16 electron species. Okay, and this, if it has to react with the substrate, needs a vacant coordination site. So you have a ligand dissociation, vacant coordination site is generated, and an alkene is coordinated. We have not written the geometry of this molecule, but this is basically it has to be written in such a way that you have hydrogen and an alkene, right? Hydrogen and an alkene, and you would have to write it in such a way. Let's write it in such a way that you would generate the linear aldehyde. So again, you have the possibility of a 1 electron ligand which is present on the metal and a 2 electron species which is an acceptor for a migratory insertion process. This will generate through a migratory insertion, you would simply generate an alkyl compound. So this is again a migratory insertion step. So you had a ligand substitution or a ligand addition, dissociation and addition, that's a ligand substitution process. Then a migratory insertion. The migratory insertion is now followed by one more migratory insertion. So here, of course, carbon monoxide is added in order to generate your 18 electron process again. Migratory insertions do not have that constraint that they need a vacant coordination site. So you could write wherever possible in a catalytic cycle, you should generate a 16 electron or an 18 electron process. Okay. So 16 electron and 18 electron processes, intermediates are probably needed in every process that you can think of. And that is because these are the species which are identified through spectroscopic means. So this is the intermediate that you have, and this intermediate can do again a migratory insertion process. This time it is the alkyl group which migrates. First we had a hydrogen which migrated. First it was the hydrogen which migrated, this species which migrated. Now you have an alkyl group which is migrating. So then you have a migration of this species onto one of the carbon monoxides. So we could write it like this, which will lead to a third intermediate here, which is again set up for a reaction. This can continue, but then an acyl group is not a good for migratory insertion. So maybe we should put X mark on that, and that's the reason we end up with the option of terminating this reaction by reacting with hydrogen. This is, of course, not very clear. Elstrom-Broich has written it as if it's a hydrogen complex, but I could write it as a sigma bond metathesis. So let me simply explain what I'm saying. Suppose I have this species and I have hydrogen molecule. I could have a sigma bond metathesis where I form a new bond between the cobalt and the hydrogen and the R and the H. And this could very simply generate the aldehyde. Sorry, this had a CO in between. So we are talking about hydrogen which is interacting with this acyl carbon, and so you would form RCOH and HCOCO4. So that's HCOCO4 is a species which, of course, it's still written here as a coordinatively unsaturated intermediate. That's fine. This would be in equilibrium with this, and it would lead to the regeneration of the catalytically active species, which is HCOCO3. So you can see here that you have had multiple migratory insertion reactions. In the Monsanto's acetic acid process, you had only one migratory insertion. And here you're having multiple migratory insertion reaction. And until it reaches a step where the species is not capable of doing migratory insertion readily, and it has to compete with this reaction, which terminates the whole process and generates an aldehyde. Now, let's just think about this for a minute. You reacted this acyl species with dihydrogen. What about reacting with this alkyl species? As I mistakenly wrote it, this could also happen. I have RCH2COCO3 and I can react it with plus H2, and then I would generate RCH2 CH2H and HCOCO3. So I could have generated that species also. So this is a side product. The way in which the reaction works is another addition of carbon monoxide, which is faster than the reaction of this species with H2. So the rates of these reactions are critical. If the rate of this reaction is slow and if the hydrogen reaction is faster here, then you're going to end up with a hydrogenation reaction, right? So this would just be a hydrogenation step. Side product. We don't want to do that now. We want actually hydroformylation, and hydroformylation can be handled only if the carbon monoxide reacts faster than the hydrogen. Here, because the acyl group migration is slow, this is very, very slow, then I have a significant amount of this acyl species, and this acyl species can react with hydrogen because that reaction is faster than the, we can call it the reverse, faster than the reverse reaction even. So this is critical. This is critical in this whole process. You need, suddenly I've started the, now I don't know how to stop this, but I hope it doesn't slow down the whole process. Okay. So what we were discussing is the following. The hydroformylation reaction has to compete with the hydrogenation step. And the pressure of carbon monoxide is critical. And the rates of migration versus rates of sigma bond metathesis is also critical. Okay, so that's the only way you're going to get the right products. Okay, so let me see if, yeah, I think I managed to shut it down. Let's proceed to the next step. So this is called the union carbide process. And the union carbide process differs from the previous process that I told you, from the fact that it uses rhodium. Again, a more expensive metal. But why do they use it? In the previous process, you were using HCOCO4. HCOCO4 is volatile. And RHCOCO PPH3 thrice, which is the catalyst used by union carbide, this is not volatile. So you can see how some subtle changes are necessary in order to prevent side reactions. In the previous case, HCOCO4 is lost from the reaction medium because it is a gas, and because it is volatile. You lose catalyst through, as a function of time, you lose catalyst, and then the process slows down. So if you use RHCO PPH3 thrice, then it's not volatile, the catalysis is better. I would leave it as an exercise for you to write the catalytic process. It is there in the book, but I would ask you to write it out for yourself. Try and do that as an exercise after class, so that you get an idea about how to write catalytic cycles. Of course, there are multiple options when you write catalytic cycles. That is true. We're going to encounter some more variations right now, but what I would suggest is try and stick to 16 electron species and 18 electron species. And also remember that you can always work out the whole cycle in the reverse direction. You start with the product and see how you can do retrosynthetic analysis. You have to do a retrocatalytic analysis, I guess. Okay, retrocatalysis you need to do. Fine. So we have discussed hydroformylation. I told you that there are several complications. You have the complications of the volatility of the catalyst. You have reduction as a side product. That's another reaction. Hydrogen can add on to a metal complex to form dihydrides, and of course this is an option that we wrote. I wrote it as a sigma bond metathesis. Some books give it to you as addition of hydrogen to give you a cobalt-3 intermediate, and then subsequently reductive elimination to give the hydride. That's a possibility, but I prefer the sigma bond metathesis reaction. So unless there is some experimental evidence to show that the dihydride is formed, I think the simpler the reaction, the better it is. But one has to use some amount of prior knowledge, as they say in patents, prior art. So the union carbide process uses molten PPH3. Okay, so this is another strange thing that they use. The temperature is such that the PPH3 that they use melts and blends with the alkane. So like I said, the important point is to generate linear aldehydes. These are preferred. As I told you, linear aldehydes can lead to linear alcohols, obviously, and linear alcohols are better as detergents than branched alcohols. So this again goes to the way in which your soap behaves in water. So you can see how much of the commercial factors drive the industry to make one over the other. Both are alcohols in the end, whether it's branched or not branched, but then the linear alcohol forms better foam, and all these things are important. So you, instead of cobalt, which is 1,000 times cheaper, use rhodium, which is compensating for the 1,000 times more expense by its effectiveness and its selectivity. Okay, as I told you, these are all high pressure carbon monoxide reactions, so they turn out to be very expensive processes, but technology has improved significantly and people are able to generate these industrially. So these are all homogeneously catalyzed industrial processes. What was once a domain of heterogeneous catalysis. Okay, now I come to one more innovation. I'm calling it innovation because these are small modifications which people used. Instead of using PPH3, Rhone-Poulenc, which is again another company, Rhone-Poulenc used a substituted phenyl group in the phosphine, and it was a metasulfonic acid that was introduced. So this TPPTS is triphenyl phosphane trisulfonic acid, sodium, trisulfonate sodium. Okay, so it is actually more than TPPTS, but the abbreviation that is preferred and that is used is TPPTS. The structure of the molecule is written here. I have drawn it out for you here. This is TPPTS. What's the specialty? The specialty is that in the meta position you have 3 SO3H groups, and these of course will form the sodium salt very easily. They are very acidic molecules. So the sodium salt is water soluble. And if it's water soluble, then the whole reaction can be carried out in a mixture of water and the substrate. So the catalyst remains in the aqueous phase. Aqueous phase has the catalyst. And it's at the interface that the catalysis is probably going on. And the separation of the catalyst from the product, separation of the catalyst from product is fairly easy. At the end of the reaction, you just do a simple phase separation between the aqueous medium and the organic aldehyde which you have generated. So this is the Rhone-Poulenc. Rhone is again another river, and Rhone-Poulenc must have been another company which introduced this innovation, and they this ligand is very popular. Even in 2020, I saw there is a paper published on TPPTS and how it can carry out some unique reactions. Okay. Okay. In all these reactions, an anionic substrate adds, inserts into a neutral substrate, reductive elimination and insertion, migratory insertion reactions dominate the key steps. Okay, now I come to the other group of reactions where it is not migratory insertion of an anionic substrate or a 1-electron substrate, but it is reactions where you have two 2-electron ligands which are interacting. The company that introduced it is BASF. I have already told you about BASF. in the first slide, where I said that they held the original patent for using a cobalt catalyst for making acetic acid. And this company is still around. You will find BASF India is also there, and it is a very old company, and it was next to a place called Bad. The place name is actually Bad. Okay, so this is a company which was in this place called Bad. It's not pronounced Bad. It's a German. Probably it was a place where there were a lot of hot springs. So Badische aniline. Aniline is C6H5NH2, and soda is of course sodium carbonate. And so they were into making chemicals, BASF, and nobody uses the expansion anymore. It's called BASF company. What did they do? They converted acetylene. Again, acetylene is again a coal product. They converted acetylene, carbon monoxide into acrylic acid. And variations of this. And this they carried out very efficiently using nickel. Okay, nickel and copper as a smaller amount, and it's not very clear how copper helps, or many chemicals can do it. Cobalt dicarbonyl, dicobalt octocarbonyl can also do it, as I have pictured on the slide here. So variations of this lead to different products, and you would have to separate them. As you can see, there can be side reactions. Let's take a look at what a catalytic cycle would look like in this case. In this case, I have written, this was invented by a person called Reppe, Walter Reppe. And Reppe's catalytic cycles are very famous. He did a lot of chemistry with acetylene. Acetylene is again a troublesome gas because it is explosive. Acetylene can explode. So you have you have to have some safety precautions in place, and you can carry out these reactions under high pressure without having explosions. So carbon monoxide reacted with HX. I have written the catalytic cycle for you with HX. HX needs to be there only in catalytic amounts, and it is in all probability some halide that is present, because NiBr2 was used as a starting material for generating the nickel tetracarbonyl. So Br can be there, HBr can be there. And that HBr is regenerated at the end of the catalytic cycle. So we do not have to worry about it. You are going to add carbon monoxide, alcohol, and an alkyne to generate this ester. So the first step is oxidative addition to generate HNiCO2X. HNiCO2X can undergo ligand addition with an acetylene. I have simply written C triple bond C, but it could be any acetylene. So you have this is CH. I hope you understand. CH. Now I can have addition of hydrogen, insertion of, this is migratory insertion of hydride into the neutral substrate, which is into alkyne. And you can see immediately that it need not be an alkyne. Instead of last time we had alkene, now we are having an alkyne. That's the only difference. So, but nickel does this better. So, and it's cheaper. So why use something else? So you would end up with migratory vinyl group. Vinyl group now migrates to carbon monoxide. Okay, so this is migratory insertion of the vacant site was generated, and that vacant site was filled with carbon monoxide right here, and then migratory insertion now takes place to give you the key product coordinated step. And if you react this with, if you reductively eliminate, reductive elimination will give you the active species and an organic product, which is an acyl halide, which can react offline. If, of course, nowadays offline has a different meaning, but you react these two separately without utilizing a metal with ROH, it will give you this plus HBr, and that H, I should put it as HX, and that HX can be utilized for the oxidative addition again. So you can see how these reactions have to be extremely adjusted in terms of reaction rates. For example, I have HX and I have RCOX, right? So I have HX and RCOX in the medium. Both of them could have undergone oxidative addition, but RCOX, oxidative addition of RCOX is not good. It is, of course, it would have regenerated my this product, but RCOX does a one-way reductive elimination. This is much faster than the reverse reaction. So that is the reason why HX is favored. HX oxidative addition is favored, and you end up with a catalytic cycle that goes on here. So catalytic cycles require a lot of balance in various reaction rates. Okay, so let me now show you a slightly different situation. This reaction is promoted by palladium, or this reaction is catalyzed by palladium complexes, and it involves oxidative addition of this group, carbon monoxide insertion, and then an internal attack of this carbonyl group to generate the ester. Okay, so I will write it in a general fashion. I want you to go back and try out this reaction for yourselves. Write out for the previous substrate that I showed you. Okay, so let me flash that again. So this is the starting material. This is the product. Okay, now write the reaction for yourselves and satisfy that you can generate this product using the set of reactions that we just talked about. In many of these cases, there is a base, okay, because HBr might be, or HX might be generated, and that HX, if it is detrimental to the reaction, it has to be removed, and then you use a base. In the Reppe reaction, HX was essential and we did not need a base in that case. In fact, we should not have a base so that HX will activate the nickel. Here, for example, in this case, we need a base because we want to do a reaction which generates RCONU. Okay, so I have kind of switched to a stoichiometric reagent because I wanted to mention this. This is called Coleman's reagent. This is basically FeCO42 minus. This is disodium tetracarbonyl ferrate, and this is called Coleman's reagent. Okay, and it is available for purchase. It's a species that can be used for a variety of carbonyl insertion reactions. I have shown some of them here. Many of them just involve a single carbonyl insertion. Years ago, Professor M. Periasamy from University of Hyderabad showed that you could do this reaction and you could have multiple insertions of carbon monoxide. Apparently, you could have multiple insertions of carbon monoxide and form a diacetyl species. So he generated RCOCOR, okay, using not Coleman's reagent, but in situ generated Coleman's reagent, and he used copper 2+. So this apparently looks like a dicarbonyl insertion, but as far as we know in the literature, there are no dicarbonyl insertions. So the formation of this product is probably going through RCO minus species getting oxidized with 2+, getting oxidized with 2+ to RCO dot plus Cu plus 1. And this stoichiometric reaction is probably responsible for the formation of RCOCOR. But this is unique. This is a dicarbonyl, apparent dicarbonyl insertion, and it was discovered by Professor M. Periyasamy in University of Hyderabad. Okay, that was a very original contribution, and this was in fact made during a time when carbon monoxide was not, sorry, iron carbonyls were not available in India, and he generated it in situ from carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide was available, but iron carbonyls were not available. What happened was iron carbonyl was used as a reagent for coating airplanes, defense planes, so that they can evade radar. So this is so the US prohibited iron carbonyls from being exported. Okay, now I'm going to write for you another substrate, and I'm going to write so you have two carbons and a double bond. That's only 2 carbons and a double bond, and FeCO4 2 minus, FeCO4 2 minus, and this can generate for you a species like this. Now you notice that this has got, how would you handle a problem like this? You first figure out how many carbons are there in this species. 4 carbons. In the product you have 5 carbons. And you notice that you have this carbon monoxide here. You have Coleman's reagent, which is capable of giving you a CO group. Okay. Now you know that FeCO4 2 minus can do a SN2 type of a substitution here, which is also an oxidative addition. So the first step in this reaction is probably the formation of FeCO4 minus plus Br minus. Now notice that you can do a migratory insertion. You can do a migratory insertion. This is an alkyl group. This is an alkyl group. Let's write this is an alkyl group R, and here are carbon monoxides plenty. So you do a migratory insertion. So let's write that step. So you end up with CO, 2 carbons, and then a double bond. Now you notice that you almost have a 6-membered ring. Now you almost have a 6-membered ring, and I can do a kind of a reaction where I have again this is the only strange step that I have to do. I end up with a migratory insertion reaction of this group onto this double bond because it's juxtaposed. This is one possibility. Okay, so I have FeCO3. Okay. Now, at no point in this we have, this is again a negatively charged species. Now, if I quench this with H plus, I would end up with HFeCO3. Let me write it HFe and then this species, which if I do a reductive elimination, I would end up with, this is not a catalytic cycle, so I don't have to write it like that. H reductive elimination will give me your product. This is not a catalytic reaction because at the end of the step, you have to quench it with water. You could have written it in such a way that you end up with a 4-membered ring. Let me see if I can write it in a slightly different fashion. It's possible that the migration happened after. No, it doesn't look like it. This is probably the way in which it happens. So the formation of this is explained here. I have violated one more. I mean, I have. This is the stoichiometric reaction, of course. This is again a migratory insertion, and this migratory insertion is happening with a slow acyl group. So as I told you, acyl group migration would be slower than an alkyl group migration. So that's the only difficult part in this, but it is probably favored because of the 6-membered transition state that would be there and the formation of this nice 5-membered ring in the product. I'm going to stop here today because I want to discuss something else. I will discuss I will discuss the remaining reactions in a short video that I will post. So because we don't have time, I'm going to remaining reactions I'm going to discuss in a video. So let me now tell you that I'm going to have a short interaction with each one of you in through a Teams meeting, and Arpita, the teaching assistant, and myself, we will both be there. We will ask some questions on the paper that you have written, and this will be on 18th, 19th, and 20th. Okay, so let me come back to this slide. This is the last slide. The remaining things I will explain in the video, like I said. But this will be for 15 minutes. You would have to briefly explain the paper that you have written. So this would be a viva. 15 minutes. Be prepared with a maximum of 5 slides. Maximum of 5 slides. Anything more, you lose marks. Less marks. If it's more than 5, you would lose marks. So this would be on your paper, and this test would be between 18th and 20th. You can book your dates with Arpita. You already have her email ID, so send her a time. Maybe she will set up something so that you can block it online. But this will have to be done between these dates. And the final exam itself is tentatively booked on 22nd. Unless we have a problem, I will conduct the exam just like we conduct the other exams in class tests. Okay. So any questions?
Sir?
Yes, Anantu.
The Viva voice, can it happen anytime during the daytime, like around 9 to 5, anywhere in between 9 to 5?
No.
Or is there any particular time slot?
I would prefer the class timings. So, because during the day I am involved in some administrative work or other, and that takes away quite a bit of my time. Pankaj?
Sir, I have few questions. Maybe one question about the class.
Today's class?
So, yes, sir, today's class.
Yeah.
The hydroformylation reaction and maybe the coupling reactions too. We were talking about the side product, about the migratory insertion going to the other way. So how that is controlled? So the secondary aldehyde that is generated.
Oh, yeah. So the migratory insertion happens in such a way that the R group stays away from the metal atom, right? So, for example, if you added the hydrogen to the primary carbon, the CH2 group, then you would end up with a branched hydrocarbon. Okay, so there are two options here. The option is to migrate it to this carbon or this carbon. Okay, I will call it 1 and 2. If the hydrogen migrates to carbon atom number 2, it produces the linear aldehyde, right? The cobalt carbon bond will be found between 1 and carbon atom number 1 and cobalt. So this is the competition, and if the hydrogen migration happens to the CH2, then of course you have the branched product, which will lead to a more sterically congested intermediate here. So naturally, because the metal is controlling it, if I have a PPH3 group, for example, or if I have other groups, then I can reduce the branched product. Okay, so the union carbide process probably has an advantage of selectivity as well as having a non-volatile catalyst.
Sir, does that here also, does that depend on polarity of solvent as it was dependent in Suzuki reaction?
Not Suzuki reaction. You're talking about the
Heck reaction, sorry.
Heck reaction. Yeah. No. In these cases, the polarity of the species are not very large. All the species are reasonably non-polar. So there is no polarity involved. Okay. Let me not say that, because in that case also they are not terribly polar. It was just an observation that maybe incipient plus charge is generated. Okay, and a nucleophile is attacking in that case, right? What was the species which was attacking in the Heck reaction?
R,
it was
R
minus. Huh?
R. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So here
Rx addition and then R migration.
Yeah. So I think there is here there is no, it's not polarity of the solvent. Most of the reactions are handled by the substrate itself is used as a solvent. So that will avoid environmental problems and so on. As much as possible, you would like to avoid using solvents. So I don't think in these cases, like PPH3 was used as molten PPH3, and those are very typical of not using any other solvent. Otherwise, you would have dissolved the PPH3. So, okay, I think the solvent effect was not, at least I have not read about it. I have not come across that prominently. You had something more?
No, sir, that's all.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I will, you can check yourself, and I will also check whether there is any solvent effect. But as far as I know, there is no solvent effect in this case. Okay, so I'm going to end the recording and end the class. I will